I was watching this video of the Opry archives where they have all of these instruments archived and everything. And I was like, and they were interviewing someone, and I was like, oh my God, they're using Gear Check at the Opry to completely archive their instruments and everything. How did you come up with the idea for that software?
Let's say that a huge section of our customers we don't talk about publicly because instruments and collections are quite often secret.
Yeah. So that was on the internet. I found that on the internet. They were being interviewed about it.
Okay, but I'm just saying that if we can talk about Gear Check, let's talk about it without getting into. I can give you some examples. So guitars are. Well, let me talk about a guitar I have. I collected guitars because I needed a library of stuff to look at. What is the binding like on a Gretsch, 56 Gretsch, blah blah blah. That's sort of untenable because you'd have to have 2,000 or 4,000 guitars to pull that off. We, at a certain point, built something called Gitwick, which is still in use, which is a photo resource of detailed photos, not just the Google front picture and maybe the back picture, but like 40 or 50 pictures. It was crowdsourced, and it's semi-complete, but it was a big thing. But we started looking at collecting, and for instance, the guitar I was going to tell you about, I have Jerry Reed's 56 Telly, and this is the one he played Amos Moses on and a bunch of stuff. And Jerry Reed was, one of my absolute heroes. James Burton, they're on one hand, and Reed was one of them. And when I was working for him, he got sick of the neck that was on his 56 Telly. He wanted a wider one, and Fred Newell had this Mighty Mite neck on it. So he ordered 6 of them. He said, Cock, we're going to change his neck out. And so I put this neck on. It was wider, and he liked it. And I said, Jerry, what do you want to do with the neck we're taking off? He goes, Cock, I don't care. You can smoke it. You can eat it. You can put it where the sun don't shine. And I said, does that mean I can have it? And he goes, do I need to repeat that? So I ended up with a neck. And long story short, he traded somebody else the pickups, and I traded them out eventually. And then after he was gone, the body showed up. Chip Young had it on the guitar that we put, that I changed the neck on. Chip Young had nothing, that had the wrong pickups, the wrong everything, but I got the body. So I've got Jerry Reed's guitar.
You put it back together. You got everything, you put it back together. I got everything,
as Jerry Reed's, so as a 56 Telly with a route a neck pickup route, because he was experimenting on stuff. It's worth, we could ask somebody here, but it's worth half of what it would have been worth as Jerry Reed's guitar that he did all that stuff to. And then there's the story of how I got it and all that stuff. It's worth 5x, 10x that, because it's got story. So story is everything. Story is everything. And as we have gone down through at my shop and just the people I know, even with the Plek, we find that anything you have records of is important and increases the intrinsic value of that, but it also increases the monetary value of something. And so a long time ago, we started, when it first became possible to build websites and apps, we started looking at what we then called Vintage Registry, which was something that was a way of putting together a history of an instrument. Where did it come from? Who played it? What work's been done on it? What work hasn't been done on it? And we sort of saw that as being kind of the wristband, the hospital wristband to follow a guitar around. We early on paired it with an RFID tag, which is about the size of a piece of rice, that you can, we pull the end pin, the strap button order, we shoot this hole in about 3/4 of an inch, stick it in there. You can't find it in a million years. If you aren't looking for it, you would never know one was there. And if you are looking, it's, it'll tell you that this guitar has an ID. It's just like your dog. If your dog runs up and they happens to have one of these exact same chips, you might get your dog back, but you also might know it's your dog, and so forth. So we built this whole site around collection management, and we've been working because the people who care about collections the most are these high-end collectors, and quite often high-end collectors who have a team that kind of works with them. Because if you're a high-end collector and you've got 200 or 300 or something, or you're a museum, if you're the owner, you're probably not going to sit there and do the photographs. You're going to have somebody like our photographer today do this stuff.
So someone like Jim Irsay, for example,
would create a full history that's not in a spreadsheet. It's a site. It has the photos. It has the repair history. It has the insurance history. It's got the RFID tag. It's got the generic story of what it is, which is this 56 Telly. They were generally white, see-through white with white pickguard, maple fingerboard, blah, blah, blah. That's the generic thing. And then the story of that particular instrument. This guitar was owned by so-and-so, is used in this sort of way. And here's its history. And so it's one place to put all the stuff together. It's private. It's secure. I mean, it's extremely secure because privacy matters to people who have things. And it's a way to start to build provenance. You have provenance, but if you're just keeping it up here in your head, or you keep your receipt in your drawer and you happen to live in LA and the hillside burns down and you're Landau or somebody like that and you're wiped out. Anyway, so gear check is well, it would be very helpful. It would be really helpful to Josh Rawlings, who's done the digital side of this and has been partner in this, is in the building.
Should we bring him in?
Let's bring him in.
Should we bring Josh in?
Because he has I can tell you why it's important. He can tell you more about how it's important.
Should we get Josh on the couch? Let's go.
Would you feel like coming over and you're talking about this?
What's up? This is cool. This is the other side.
This could be your big break.
Hey, I know.
We got Josh Rawlings on the couch now.
Good day. Hey, Joe. What's up, y'all? We're talking about gear check?
We're talking about gear check.
So let me introduce Josh.
Please introduce Josh.
So I run a repair shop, GLASER Instruments, but on the side we've made parts and tools. We have a company called Music City Bridge. By the way, Music City Vintage, you stole our name. But Music City Bridge, for obvious reasons, because we're in Music City, and we started making bridges, and it just seemed like a bridge, and we also have, so we make parts and tools. We make software, and we've got a company called Git Suite that makes software. We make shop management software. We make Gitwick, which I told you was a photo resource. And that naturally, and along with the effect of the Plec data, it got us thinking a lot about this. And so Josh runs the whole parts and tools and software stuff, and that's what he does.
Yeah.
So how important is this stuff to document? Like, this is your whole thing.
Well, I think I heard you guys cover this a moment ago. The difference between having a story and not having a story could mean tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we've kind of made a mission out of going to high-end collections, these people who have this is like real assets. And if you think about gear check as essentially the fidelity account where you might manage your stocks, but the same sort of place where you'll manage your collection, these things are going to move up and down in value, and that value is going to change based on story. So we'll physically show up to a place and say, these are all the physical things that you own. This is their current status, and this is their current market value. And one of the things we've been able to do, and this wouldn't have been possible even a year ago, is get real-time market data on what the thing's worth today. And so any collector can now look at the range of stuff they have in their gear check account, which they've never had before. They've just kept it in spreadsheets or in a file cabinet in the garage that is prone to flooding, fire, and other issues. And we don't need to be reminded about the issue of natural disasters and people never getting paid off for insurance if they don't have it documented. We show up and we document this stuff, and it transforms the collection from something that is opaque and held in one person's head into something that maybe, if there's a death in the family, can be translated to the next of kin, or at the very least, when these things go up for sale, they have a comprehensive history. That's the deal.
So you guys show up to these massive collections and you guys actually do the documenting?
Keep in mind, somebody can do this themselves perfectly well.
Right.
But it turns out that quite often a white glove process, which we have found to be that people actually appreciate that. That's one of the options.
Yeah.
But can they do it? Sometimes we just show up, like with Steve Earle. We went and looked at the beginning of his collection, worked with his guys, going through the steps of photography of information upload. Again, insurance appraisals, and appraisals change over time. So having a history of your appraisal is important. Where we kind of went into this philosophy of what do you want in there and how do you put it in and how do you then manage it over time? Who do you have a manager? You have an owner of an account who is the owner of the instruments, but maybe they have somebody who manages it for them, who they allow access for a while, and maybe that guy, that person becomes an astronaut and they don't have access after a while. So it just whatever. We just kind of looked at it thinking about the fact that every collection is important to everybody. But if you start with the ones when instruments are worth $300,000 or $1,300,000, these are assets. This is an asset class, and it's very important to know what you have, whether you have it appraised or authenticated. Know that that's absolutely done, and know when it happened and by whom. And so this is also is anchored with blockchain entries. So if you take a Martin, for instance, a vintage Martin that has ivory binding, naturally came with ivory binding, Brazilian rosewood. Well, you can't ship this between countries now. Ivory is restricted. At some point, it will be possible to, by establishing the authenticity and the initial manufacturing date, this is getting better and better as access to data gets better, it will be possible to grandfather this stuff in, I would think. And so being able to say that in 2025, this really was ivory, and this is the proof line of why it's ivory, or saying that this mahogany, which is now in 2040 is no longer legal. You can't use mahogany. Well, this mahogany actually dates back to 2025 because better late than never. You can say, well, we really should have done this in the 80s when the technology wasn't there, or we really should have done this in 2015 or 2018 when Joe and Josh first started talking about it. Well, you didn't do it. But now, if you do it, you're at least setting yourself up for having the story and also having the dated protection of when stuff happens. Because everything is about when does the story go back to? There's this famous set of stories about an art gallery in New York that was selling these paintings that came out of this private collection. Nobody wanted to talk about them because it was a secret collection. These guys were buying these paintings, and it just seemed, this guy took it to an authenticator because he just wanted to make sure. He was a dentist. And he was like, how did I get so lucky as to buy a Kandinsky and got a pretty good price, and I didn't have to bid against, Andy Warhol or whoever it was. And he took it to the authenticator, who said, well, this is great. It's a wonderful looking Kandinsky. The only problem is that the yellow paint wasn't made till 20 years after the painting was painted. And so the whole thing is going into this direction of what can you prove, when can you prove it, and who said, when, why, how come, and so forth. And so we just built a platform for it.
Is this valuable if you have a collection of guitars that maybe aren't significantly valuable or collectible or vintage?
Depends on what the story is.
Yeah.
So recently, we went and looked at there's a great rock and roll artist who passed away recently.
Yeah.
And he didn't happen to be, some people like expensive stuff and some people like interesting stuff. And he happened to be sort of a beach-oriented guy, and he liked things that sort of represented his life. And he had some really nice vintage guitars, but he also had some things that just represented his lifestyle. And he has this telly, this sort of yellow telly. It's got a palm tree on it. And without him having been the owner, it's $215, him being the owner, because he has this giant sea of fans, and, who knows what I think the family, if they just, for instance, we're going to put it in a foundation and do something or donate it to a museum or something. It's the more that it is donated or represented as its story, the more important it is as an instrument. If it got used on, Jerry Reed thing, the fact that I can find some proof of the fact that he used it on Amos Moses changes everything. And so if you don't do it, you can be anybody. You can be, obviously you're not trying to be a session player, but you probably play some music. And say you just went into the studio and played something that turned out to be like Wooly Bully. Suddenly the world rocked around it, even though you never did anything before, and you might not plan to do anything afterwards. But here's the guitar that was played on Wooly Bully. That's incredibly important. If you say, well, yeah, we didn't really do anything about it, then you've got that red 335 or 345 that is the Back to the Future guitar that Gibson's making this big, I mean, it's great fun, but where that guitar is and really is it, that could have been solved a long time ago.
When they find that guitar, how are they going to authenticate it to know that that's the one? They're going to grain match it with photos of it?
They could. There's various things that prove a guitar is a guitar or that it is as old as it's supposed to be. And that's just that's obviously the future, because just having a strong opinion is no longer the best way to, I don't go to the doctor and go, hey, it hurts right here. And he goes, well, looks like you broke this bone. Oh, you cracked it there. He goes, I've got this thing, we're going to check it out. And that's the way the world's going, one way or another.
How hard is this stuff? Like, you see people pop open tellies, the necks, they'll pop the neck off and they'll go, oh, there's the pencil markings. It's whatever it is. I go, couldn't someone have just taken a pencil and just scribbled that? Like, why do we trust these pencil markings so much?
We don't anymore.
Really?
No, that day of that, if you have something that's been known since 1975, we're right with Dustin Miller and Brian Gallup and Tom Nania. We're writing this book on pre-war dreadnoughts right now. And Martin made about 2,000 of these incredible guitars in the 30s, basically. They made 91, supposedly, D45s. And of course, things happen. A house might burn down, something would happen. So they made 91, and there's only about 148 of them left. And so how does that happen? Starting in the 70s, people started converting D28s to D45s and doing a damn good job. And so the only thing is that if a guitar's been at least known since 1975, that it was at least one of the early conversions. Or if there's a photo of somebody in 1940 with it, then it was certainly out of the 30s. So again, story and documentation matters. It matters tremendously.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the one thing I was going to add to this is there's a multi-trillion-dollar handoff happening in the economy where the baby boomers are retiring from their gigs, and the way that relates to the musical instrument market is dealers have been the appraisers and the authenticators, and there's a lot of danger in that. There's no other industry where you go buy a house and you ask the sales agent for the house that you want to buy if it's in good shape. And so there's going to have to be institutions and documentation for, hey, this is how you actually appraise and authenticate that something is real. And this is how we're getting market data in a transparent way. Because right now it's coming, and there's just not enough people who are going to be alive in 10 years who are going to actually be able to do this work. And that's a real fact. And part of the work that we're doing is picking the brains of this kind of
brain trust.
Yeah, this brain trust essentially, and translating their knowledge into something that can be repeatable and consistent. And GearCheck plays a huge role in that. I mean, just one quick aside, which is we're talking about photo ID. Hey, couldn't you use the fingerprint of this grain to do this? I reached out to the foremost expert of photo ID. And what he told me was you print out a photo of one sample and you print out a photo of another sample and you put it under a magnifying glass and you match the lines up. That's how they do it. That's how the world-class guy does it. And I'm just thinking in the future that guy is not passing that skill set to the next generation. We're going to have to build technology and systems to deal with this, just like they do with houses, wristwatches, sports memorabilia, every other place where you can get a third-party authentication is going to happen for guitars. And GearCheck plays a role.
And it's not in the future; it's in the very near future. And that's actually, right. If you could peel back this isn't paranoia. If you could peel back what any government is using to do surveillance on its neighbors, that's a lot of it is human judgment, but a lot of it is not anymore. And so, any of that stuff will have 4 or 5 opinions. Now you can have 4 or 5 people do an appraisal. Even in GearCheck, you can send something off and get 4 or 5 appraisals, and you should, because one person's thing won't help you when you go to sell it if there's a global internet and somebody can reference it and go, well, they sold it to you for $150,000 because they sold it to you, and it's actually really the history is only worth 71. It's only worth 71,000, and you just took their word because they're so and so. But also, if you can anything that you can pin back to a certain point in time becomes incredibly powerful. And it's up to you to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you, and nobody's going to do it after the fact.
I love it.
Yeah.
What do you look for if you have a pre-CBS Strat come through the shop? It's got 0 provenance. What do you look for that you think undistinguishably will mark it as what it is, or will let you know that it is what it is.
You hope there's a family that has a picture of their kid when he was 7 years old standing with it, and then he went off to Vietnam and didn't come back, and it's been the case, and the case looks like it's not been anywhere except out of the bed, under the bed. That's what you hope for. Otherwise, here's the problem. I went to a recent guitar show in another country, and I was talking to somebody about this whole thing of gear check and all this stuff, and he said, appraisers will always have the last roll. And I said, well, why is that? And he goes, well, because I know where every little tooling mark ever was on the Fender stuff. I know Fender from 51 to whatever, and I know every single tooling mark, every mark I know every single like that thing. You could not fool me. And I go, well, that's great. Do you do repair? And he goes, yes. And I said, do you do restoration? He said, yes. I said, do you do vintage touch-up? He said, yes. I said, what if you took a guitar and did what you needed to change it to look exactly like a 1961 Stratocaster, whatever it was that you threw out there. And then you celebrated, you had a drink, you took it to a friend's house, you had a drink, you fell down the stairs, you hit your head, you woke up, you didn't know who you were, that came back, but you didn't know anything about what you've done, and one day that guitar comes into your shop, would you be able to tell that it was fake? And he looked at me, and he rocked for a while, and then he gave me the I don't like you look, and he walked off. But that's the facts. That is the facts. Yeah. And so you have this race between forgery and authentication. That's right. And if you don't document something, you will never, it's just an arms race. It's just like right now what we're going through in the world with the arms race. There's better drones, and now there's better drone detection. If you don't document something and you don't start as soon as you can, by the time it becomes super important to do so, you won't have any proof that, you won't have the proof that would have really helped everything. And nobody's like, so custom color Fenders. People speculate that 40% of them are not original. You can still buy one. You can still like it. You can still enjoy it. But if you're not thinking about instruments as having value and resale value, then you just take it home and you take it down to your room in the basement and you play it and you kind of go, look what I have. But that's separated from selling. And the same thing with stories. If you heard that something belonged to somebody, but if you don't go do a little interview with them and say, hey, I mean, this is what we've done with most of these high-end clients. We sit them down and go, tell us about this story. Tell us about what you know about it, your acquisition, and why you bought it. Why did you buy this incredible, this beautiful red, rare color Telly? And they tell that story, and that is as much a part of the value of that guitar as the paint, as anything else. And if you look across the art world, you look across the violin world, I mean, there are no original Stradivarius violins. They've all been renecked. There's one that hasn't been renecked. People don't buy them. They don't pay $21 million for these things because they're in mint condition. They buy them because Joshua Heifetz or somebody played it because it was used, because it has this history, its story. And if it has a great sound, it's going to have a great history. Beaten up guitars. I mean, here we are at Music City Vintage, by the way, an incredible thing in my same neighborhood. Berry Hill, music capital of the world, where there's 48 studios. Now, if you take the most beaten up guitar in here, it's probably beaten up because somebody really, really loved that. And they really played the dog out of it. And that's a good sign. That's not a strike against it. We're not talking about the Middle East where the only thing of value is a virgin who's never been out of her dad's house. We're talking about things that if you can prove that somebody loved them, you can justify that the reason they loved them is a justifiable reason for spending a lot for an instrument. Keith Richards' favorite guitar is beaten up, but it's worth much more than the one he has that's mint condition, which is just a guitar in mint condition. Peter Frampton, also a neighbor here, he's got a studio right down the street, has a guitar, his famous black Les Paul went down in a plane crash in Venezuela in the 70s and caught on fire in the case. But because it was in a road case, the fire went out quickly. It just ravaged the headstock a little bit. You know, when he found it, he had it brought up here, suspicious of whether it was as he should have been, whether it's the original guitar. And he called me, and he called Mike McGuire out at Gibson, and they found parts for it, new tuners and stuff. And I did the restoration. I talked him into keeping everything worn and torn like it was. He said he was at first he wanted to just get it restored to brand new. And I said, Peter, just think about if we can keep, the laugh lines and the little belly and stuff, and and that's what we did. That guitar is got to be one of these several $1 million guitars, more so because it now has the thing. He played all those great hits. Do you feel all that kind of stuff, and also it's got the best lost and found story in the world.
Yeah, right.